The Philadelphia 76ers continue to wait for that fateful day that is the NBA draft lottery and plan out their offseason from there. However, we have some more interesting quotes regarding a familiar face on this team, with Kyle Lowry continuing to express his desire to return to the Sixers next season. I'm going to break down exactly what he said, what it means for this Sixers team, and why I think there's a different angle that I have failed to acknowledge about this thus far. Also, we got another anonymous poll across the NBA with of course, some players taking their shots at some Sixers stars. So do you want to dive into exactly what the vote is as it pertains to the most overrated player in the NBA? Going to touch on each of that in this video, and to dive right into things here, do want to start off initially with the headline that Kyle Lowry hopes to stay with the Sixers and mentor teammates for the 20th season. And the article writes, from Aaron Grugan here, despite an injury-plagued, tumultuous season, Kyle Lowry is hoping to stay with the Philadelphia 76ers for what would be his 20th season in the NBA, even if it means playing less and mentoring more, which, to be perfectly upfront here, was essentially his role last year. That I don't think anyone last season or this season signed Kyle Lowry with the intentions of this guy is a difference maker from an on-court perspective. Now, can you be a difference maker behind the scenes? I do think the answer to that is yes, particularly with the young core, having a Tyrese Maxey, having a Jared McCain, having a Quentin Grimes, who spoke very highly of Lowry, that I do want to touch on in the beginning. Now, with that said, I've also been very vocal and still stand by the point that I think it's a mistake from the Sixers team if you do not maximize all 15 roster spots. That I think this season, and the Sixers are not even the most egregious example of this, as you can look around the league, that I do think teams make mistakes by kind of factoring in this mentor role, the Udonis Haslem role, or a PJ Tucker role, a guy like that. I want guys that can legitimately play basketball top to bottom on this roster. That's the same reason why I'm pushing for a guy like Ricky Council IV, who you can make far more of a compelling case for his impact or potential as a basketball player than Kyle Lowry. I don't want him on this roster next year because I don't think he helps the Sixers team win. Now, with that being said, I don't know the logistics of working out some mentor or coach role or something like that. I know Kyle Lowry playfully had the Coach Lowry tag on his chest for a portion of the season whenever he was not playing there, but nonetheless, to hear him out a little bit on his point, doing a dive to these quotes here. So to start out with, in this article here, writes this coming from Quentin Grimes initially, quote, Lowry was a vocal leader for us, even in the games where he wasn't playing. At halftime, pregame, after games, during practice, he was always teaching the younger guys, always helping me out. When I first got to the team, even during games in that time, he was telling me where I could attack, where I can make plays if they're doubling me, where the roll man might be, so he was definitely kind of a big brother figure out there. This season was a disaster for Philadelphia. We all know that. Any positives or developments the players and squad overall can take from the lost campaign could be a huge mental boost going into the summer and eventually going into next season. Quote, just coaching me out there on the court because he's a 19-year vet. He's seen it all, Grimes said. He's got an NBA championship and everything like that, so he's seen everything that's in the NBA. He was just helping me out the whole time, really the whole time. I definitely benefited from him for sure. And to Lowry's credit, I think we attached this like veteran presence, vocal leader way too easily here. He was a guy that you could see the proof in the pudding, that you watch the Sixers bench, you can see him standing up, directing, you see in timeout that he's pulling guys to the side, talking to them directly. And I do think he deserves a little bit of credit for that. We've seen guys, veterans brought into team that don't really care, that they're just there for the paycheck and to hang out and just be a presence there. Lowry was active from start to finish, and I do give him a little bit of props for that. And another guy, well, actually Kyle Lowry, who spoke directly about it himself, he said, quote, the only thing is they call me ancient. So that's the only problem I have with it, Lowry said. But that's what I'm here for, man. As a competitor, of course I want to be on the floor playing and competing. But as an elder statesman in the league, you get enjoyment out of watching these kids grow because I was once in their shoes and I've been through the things that they've been through. Sometimes playing, sometimes not playing, sometimes getting big minutes and having a great shooting game and then having terrible shooting games, and just figuring out how to ride that wave and stay consistent is what I get out of it. Just trying to help them be consistent. And if you ask Lowry, he'd like to be back next season for what would be his 20th campaign in the NBA, even if it means not being a big part of the rotation. Quote, being a part of this season showed you guys I want to at least to go out winning. We all thought we'd be playing a bit longer, and we thought we'd have a good team on paper. But you still got to put it down on the floor, Lowry said. So for me, it's just about I do want to play one more year at a level that I can compete and play as a team. Even if I'm not playing, I'm just here, or even if I am playing, but I still want to play one more year, and hopefully it is here. Lowry will become an unrestricted free agent this offseason, with the opportunity to go to any team in the association that offers him a deal, but he's excited for the 24-25 season with an apparent preference to stay in his home city with the organization and especially with one particular teammate. Now, before I hit on that particular teammate here, which shout out to Kyle Lowry there, it is incredible, by the way. 20 years in the NBA is a massive accomplishment. There are very few players that have reached that threshold there, and he does deserve his credit for him. I do like this, and I think the overall mindset from Lowry, I think it's fair to assess that he did plan on last year being his last year. And I do think he wants to go out on top, and obviously with the entire season going off the rails and being as disappointing as it was, that left a sour taste in everyone's mouth, and I think Kyle Lowry very much included under that umbrella. So when in regards to the specific teammate that he's talking about, I don't think it is a surprise to hear. He says, quote, "I have a good relationship with Nick Nurse, of course, and I think the pride of being a Philadelphian and playing in Philadelphia, you want to figure out how to be a part of something different and special," said Lowry, a North Philly native. "I think you guys all know how I feel about Tyrese Maxey. He's the reason it's been a blessing to be a part of this because he's such a phenomenal kid and a phenomenal talent. But this organization deserves to be at the top of the top, and the city deserves it, so I want to be a part of that. Hopefully I can." Lowry is, by all accounts, an absolute asset to a basketball team as a mentor and experienced veteran leader, especially with the plethora of young players that saw playing time this season for the Sixers. That said, his health and limitations on the floor as he ages are dramatically evident, and it's something that it's unlikely to turn around as Lowry enters his 40s. When it comes down to is that it will be a tough ask and risky gamble for the Sixers to use one of just 15 standard contract slots on a player who almost solely met for mentoring and leadership. There's immense value in those qualities, don't get me wrong, especially for a team with young players that will benefit most from Lowry's experience and advice. However, this is a Sixers squad that is no stranger to injuries, to say the least. So locking up one of the limited slots on the squad for Lowry to essentially be a player coach with heavy emphasis on the coach part is a lot to ask. Now, my only pushback here, and again, I've been pretty clear on my belief that I do think you need to maximize all 15 roster spots. But the other thing to point out is we've heard more and more buzz about the bad habits of this franchise, starting with the stars at the top, not having the culture that needs to be in place. I do think Kyle Lowry is a guy who could help change that a little bit. And obviously he's been here for a couple seasons now. It's not like this is his first time walking through the door, but I do wonder if they want to shift, if they want to lean into this culture change, and they should to a point here, if Lowry can help spearhead that or be a part of that, starting to build winning habits on a team that needs it, I couldn't see the case there and the value there. Now, these are questions that Daryl Morey and Nick Nurse have to have a better feel behind the scenes for anything that you or I can express here. If they believe that, I can rock with that and get there. I would like to hear that expressed, and certainly would like to see the evidence of it moving forward for that ultimately to be a successful move. But I can understand that case to an extent here. Now, to swing things on the negative side of things, let's get to this anonymous poll. And I want to start off with the headline here that writes out, shout out to Kevin McCormick, multiple Sixers stars slighted in anonymous NBA player pool. And the exact what we got out of these voting here is that among the questions the player were polled on was who they felt is the most overrated talent in the game right now. Indiana Pacers star Tyrese Halliburton received the most votes, but multiple members of the Sixers also popped onto this list. Joel Embiid counted for 3.3% of the votes, with PG not far behind him at 2.2%. Now, I will say this voting specifically, I always think it's a little lame when you're doing the anonymous stuff, that if you want to chirp a guy or say something bad about a guy, attach your name to it and be direct about it. I get that's not the whole point of this poll here. And I do think players specifically, when it comes to the overrated conversation, they don't quite perceive it as overrated. It's who do we dislike, who do we think is the biggest cornball, and I think that's why Tyrese Halliburton won it. I don't think Tyrese Halliburton is the most overrated player in the NBA by any means. I'm not here to argue. You can make the case that he's overrated for sure, but I think if you want to look around the grand hierarchy of the NBA, I could make a much stronger case for the Rudy Goberts of the world, the Ja Morants of the world, players like that I think you can, where the production does not match the buzz or the talent. Halliburton, he's not perfect. He has his flaws as a basketball player. He's not my guy by any means. I'm not here to stick it up. But I think when the players vote, that's sort of what crosses their mind of like, who do I kind of dislike or who do I think gets a little too much praise? So I do think it gets twisted a little bit. Now, to talk specifically about the Sixers directly, I'm sure there are guys that feel that way about Joel Embiid, that, he has been an MVP. He has been a guy who also played 19 games this season, which is not good enough by any standards here. Now, injuries are the clear outlook for why there is this, and that also makes it a little complicated with the overrated. From a pure talent perspective, Joel Embiid is him, man. Joel Embiid is a one of the most talented individual basketball players that we've ever seen. That does not mean he's flawless. The injury concerns certainly at the top of the list there. And there are stretches like this season, he did not look like the best version of himself or the player that we have come to expect him to be. So there's certainly fair pushback with that. And the Paul George conversation, sometimes people say some wild things about Paul George. Brandon Miller calling him his GOAT, the best player of all time, all these kind of things. He's not that by any means. And I think that's probably where players get pushed back. And if I was, say, like a Kevin Durant or a guy who had a career kind of aligned with Paul George, that would be maddening to me, to be perfectly honest. Kevin Durant, the clearest example of this to me, of a guy who, if I want to make the real case, like he's basically Paul George and then some. So that would be maddening to me. And I can see that case being made for guys who've been around the league for a long time. We will see. Ultimately, each of these guys have a ton to prove, and I think next year is going to be pretty telling for whether they got a little fire in their gut ready to earn it back, or we will see how things shake out from there. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. I do want to hear your thoughts, particularly on the Kyle Lowry experience. Is there any world in which he could be back as an asset to this Sixers team, or do they need to make sure to keep that roster spot empty? Drop your thoughts below. I'll be back talking to you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.